You talk about the narratives of these original MCU heroes, Tony Stark, Thor, Captain America, and they're going through rites of passage, and you do so through the lens of Joseph Campbell and Arnold van Gennep. When you discuss Tony Stark's though journey specifically, you add, I think, an important character into the mix that I always thought never really gets enough appreciation, and that's Yinsen. And Yinsen, for those who may not remember, he's the gentleman who really helps Stark kind of build the Iron Man suit, the original one in the cave. But he also provides this mentorship for Stark as well. And in fact, you show in the book, of course, that there are multiple figures throughout these first three phases, or the first three phases of the MCU. People like T'Chaka and Odin, these father figures who kind of must be sacrificed in order for their sons to learn the value of peace, which I find fascinating. My question is this a theme that we find in mythology? And if so, let me kind of piggyback with that. Why do you think the MCU chose to really push this theme forward?
Well, it's a good question, and I think there are probably a couple of different explanations. Is that throughout mythological narratives, you find mentor figures of different forms, different stripes throughout. And one of the tragic things that frequently happens is having to lose those mentor figures throughout, say, the Mahabharata is a great example. So that's the five Pandavas during the Civil War have to fight against a number of their mentors who have been guiding them throughout their lives. Within the Odyssey, Odysseus have Athena who is watching over him. And when he gets home, he's able to meet his own father again. So there are always different mentor figures within the Divine Comedy. Virgil is leading Dante through the different levels of the afterlife. And so that is a common theme you find throughout world literature and world mythology. And there's a certain point past which the mentor figure cannot go, is that the person has to go on. That's, Virgil can't take Dante all the way. He has to leave him after purgatory. And so there's always this separation that occurs. And I think it mimics, in life as we're younger, we have our older figures that we find who guide us through, and due to just the basics of life, we will outlive them in many different cases. So I think that's just a thing that's experienced on a human level throughout the world. And one way in which you could interpret the MCU is that it's simply reflecting that aspect of human experience. That's something that you find throughout a lot of world narratives. Joseph Campbell's one individual who has remarked on it. Same other aspects of his work that are useful. I bring in those things which I think are really good. He has been criticized a great deal. I think in some cases those criticisms are quite warranted, and so I'm somewhat selective in the ways in which I use his book. But I think that his way of talking about the elements of myth that can touch us, I've always appreciated a great deal, and so I try to bring those parts in. But this journey that heroes go on, to borrow his phrase, is something you can find a lot of different elements. The more cynical interpretation that I've heard is that this concept of the hero's journey is something that has become more of a trope among screenwriters, and so that it's just kind of a formulaic thing that's brought in. So if you want to look at it as optimistic or pessimistic way of looking at storytelling, I think you have your choice. I think that it's probably a mix. There's a reason for certain formulas, and there's a reason why certain stories get retold. Maybe it's because you borrow from earlier tropes that you find in cinema. But on the other hand, the reason for the formula might be because it works, because it does reflect things that are much older, like some of those mythological examples that I gave. So it's probably a mix of these things. And so you can kind of, in a cynical way, be repeating a pattern, but there is a reason to begin with for the pattern, I think. I don't know if that answers your question in the way that you had put it, but that's at least where my mind initially goes when I start to think about that dynamic.